Friends, this is the story of a wronged mother. Her cruel son crossed all limits of cruelty against her. During the blessed month of Ramadan, this heartless son cast his own mother out of the house while she was fasting. Helpless and burdened by the injustice, the mother called upon her Lord. And then, how did Allah's punishment befall that man? Let's see what fate awaited him. It was the sacred time of Ramadan. Only moments remained before the Maghrib call to prayer. All around, homes were bustling with preparations for breaking the fast. Tables were being set, and everyone was eagerly anticipating the blessings of the fast. But there was one house where love and compassion had been replaced by indifference and cruelty. This was the home of Fahad, a young man from a modest family background. His mother, Zahida Begum, had spent her entire life raising him. She had educated him, supported him, and sacrificed her dreams to fulfill his. But now, the very son who had been her only hope was treating her in a way that no mother should ever have to endure. A treatment that was nothing short of a personal apocalypse. Zahida Begum's husband had passed away long ago, leaving all the responsibilities of life on her shoulders. She worked tirelessly as a seamstress, sewing clothes for people to make ends meet. She even worked in other people's homes and sold her jewelry. Yet she never let her son feel the pinch of poverty. Her only wish was for Fahad to grow up to be a good human being, successful both in this world and the hereafter, and a pillar of support for her old age. But destiny seemed to have other plans. From the start, Fahad was willful and self-centered. As he grew older, his coldness toward his mother increased. He found her words burdensome and preferred to spend more time away from home. After getting married, it was as if he had completely changed. It was the 19th fast of Ramadan. As usual, Zahida Begum began preparing iftar. She soaked chickpeas, prepared batter for fritters, and placed dates on a plate. She did it all herself. But there was no kindness in the behavior of Fahad and his wife, Nabila. "Ami, how many times have I told you not to make so many dishes? We prefer ordering food from outside," Nabila said with disdain. "Beta, there is a special blessing and love in homemade food that you won't find in takeout," Zahida Begum replied with a smile. Yes, stop giving us these old-fashioned lectures. We don't like it," Fahad snapped coldly. Hearing this broke Zahida Begum's heart, but she chose to remain silent. There were only a few minutes left until the Maghrib call to prayer. Zahida Begum had set everything in order, but as soon as she went to sit at the table, Fahad glared at her in anger. "Why did you use these dishes? How many times have I told you to keep separate dishes for us?" Zahida Begum was taken aback. "Beta, I've always used these dishes. What's the problem now?" "That's the problem. You never listen to me," Fahad yelled. "I don't want you eating with us." These words made Zahida Begum's heart sink. Tears filled her eyes. "Beta, I'm your mother. Yes, but this is my house, and I have the right to decide," Fahad declared. Nabila added fuel to the fire. "I told you before, Fahad, either keep your mother separate, or I won't stay in this house." Her words enraged Fahad even more. "Ami, leave this house right now!" Zahida Begum's face turned pale. "Beta, it's Ramadan. It's time for Iftar. Where will I go? I don't care. Go wherever you want. Just don't test my patience anymore. Just leave this house." Zahida Begum's eyes welled up with tears. She was being thrown out of her own son's home. Zahida Begum rose and went to her room. Meanwhile, Fahad's wife kept shouting, "Fahad, why don't you just kick your mother out of the house?" Fahad and Nabila had only gotten married a few days before Ramadan. Fahad had chosen this marriage himself. Nabila was his friend Amir's sister. Whenever he visited Amir, Nabila would serve tea and join them in their conversations. Fahad started visiting Amir's house daily, and soon he and Nabila began liking each other. Nabila had always been sharp-tongued, and she chose Fahad because she knew he had no sisters, just a mother. Even before moving in, she had already decided to find a way to remove Fahad's mother from the picture. When Fahad first told his mother that he wanted to marry Nabila, Zahida Begum was overjoyed. "Fahad, you've made things so easy for me. I don't have to look for a bride now. I'll happily prepare for your wedding," she said. Zahida Begum spent all her savings on her son's wedding. She had already sold most of her jewelry to cover Fahad's education and household expenses. Whenever Fahad needed money for his studies, she sold one thing or another. All she had left was a light jewelry set, which she also sold to fund the wedding. She made sure the wedding was as grand as possible. Fahad had spent all his earnings on this house, located in a prime city area, because he wanted to live in a nice home. Zahida Begum's old house had been in a slum, and when Fahad got a job, he decided to buy a new house first. When it came time to leave the old home, Zahida Begum cried because of the many memories tied to it. But she couldn't let her son go alone, so she reluctantly moved with him. When Nabila joined the household, Zahida Begum hoped that the home would feel livelier. She was happy, unaware that the woman she had so lovingly welcomed was actually an enemy to her happiness. From the start, Nabila began poisoning Fahad's mind. Whenever he sat with his mother, Nabila would get angry. She couldn't tolerate that Fahad would visit his mother first. Slowly, Fahad changed his routine. Now he would head straight to his room upon returning home and only come out much later. Zahida Begum didn't say a word, still content that her son and daughter-in-law were happy. Seeing that her mother-in-law remained patient, Nabila found new ways to trouble her. She began dressing up before Fahad returned from work, and then she would take him out. The two were very happy together, and even this didn't bother Zahida Begum. Nabila barely did any household chores, and now she started making her mother-in-law do everything: laundry, ironing, cleaning. This elderly woman, who had worked so hard to raise her son, now found herself doing all the chores while her daughter-in-law enjoyed herself. One day, Zahida Begum said to Fahad, "Fahad, my old bones don't have the strength to keep doing all this. I can't wash your clothes and clean the house anymore." "Mother, what's such a big deal about it? You used to work in other people's houses as well, didn't you? Nabila isn't used to doing chores." Zahida Begum fell silent. When Eid arrived, Nabila took her husband and went to her parents' home. Zahida sat alone, eating her meal. It was the first Eid that she spent without her son. As she brought a morsel to her mouth, tears began to flow from her eyes. They weren't even going to return home that night, as Nabila had told Zahida Begum that they'd be staying at her parents' place. Zahida had no complaints on her lips. She just wanted to see her son happy. A few days later, Nabila shared the good news that she was expecting. Zahida was overjoyed. Even Fahad, who always fought with his mother over everything, had become a bit softer. Nabila told him that the doctor had advised complete rest, so he should ask his mother to take care of all the household chores and also look after her. For Zahida, this was a challenging time. She was constantly working, cooking, washing dishes, while Nabila stayed in her room all day, either resting or chatting on the phone with her siblings. Nabila's friends started coming over frequently too. Nabila would say, "I was feeling uneasy, so I invited my friends over." And then she'd ask, "Amma, please prepare something nice for them." Zahida Begum would arrange food for them as well. Afterward, When she sat down in front of a pile of dirty dishes, she'd feel completely worn out. One day, Zahida told Fahad, "Son, I look after your wife, but now her friends come over every day. I have to cook for them too. Yesterday, while cutting onions, I injured my hand." Fahad turned to his mother angrily. "Amma, what's the problem? I'm covering all the expenses." "Yes, beta, I know you're providing everything, but I just can't handle this much work," Zahida Begum replied. Those few months were very difficult for Zahida, but she had no idea that even tougher times lay ahead. Soon, Nabila gave birth to a baby boy. Fahad's son Harun was absolutely beautiful, just like his father. Zahida Begum couldn't stop marveling at him. At first, Nabila didn't say much to her mother-in-law. She was waiting for her own health to improve. But as soon as she got back on her feet, she began interfering in everything. She would instruct Zahida on every little task and even made her change Harun's diapers. However, she never allowed Zahida to hold her grandson. Whenever Zahida tried to bond with the child, Nabila would snatch him away. She didn't want Harun to become attached to his grandmother. Now, even Fahad started getting upset with his mother. "Amma, why do you keep picking up Harun? I don't want to see you near him. If you want to stay in this house, live quietly and according to my rules. Otherwise, you're free to return to your old home." Harun was now 2 years old. One day, after breaking her fast, Zahida Begum was praying when Harun came over and started tugging at her scarf. She was standing on the prayer mat when Harun began pushing her. After completing her prayer, Zahida slapped him. Hearing her son cry, Nabila came running out of her room. She asked Harun what had happened. Harun, holding his cheek with one hand, pointed at his grandmother with the other. "Amma, why did you hit my son?" Fahad was also in the room. Hearing Nabila's shouting, Fahad also came out of the room and lashed out at his mother. "What did this little child do to you? Why did you hit him?" "Beta, he wasn't letting me pray. He kept pulling my scarf and bothering me," Zahida Begum replied. Fahad glared at his mother in anger. "Why don't you just leave us alone? Why don't you let us live in peace? Why are you ruining our lives?" Nabila then issued an ultimatum. "Fahad, either kick your mother out of the house or I'm leaving." She stood up, went to the closet, and began packing her clothes. Fahad, who couldn't imagine living without Nabila, or without his beloved son Harun, folded his hands in front of his mother. "Amma, please leave. Why are you destroying my home?" Tears filled Zahida Begum's eyes. Was this the fate of the son she had raised with so much care and sacrifice? Fahad's hatred for his mother was clearly visible. Zahida sat on the floor, weeping. "Fahad, where will I go? Tell me. I'm an old woman, all alone. Where can I go?" At that, Fahad grabbed his mother's arm, led her out of the house, and shut the door behind her. The old woman spent the entire night sitting outside. When the pre-dawn mealtime, Sehri, came, she kept her fast on an empty stomach. In the morning, when Fahad opened the door to leave for work, he found his mother sleeping near the door. He kicked her awake, and Zahida, startled, sitting up quickly. "I told you to leave," he shouted. "Why don't you understand?" Zahida clasped her hands in front of him, pleading. "No, Fahad Beta, I won't do anything from now on. I won't go near Harun. I'll just stay quietly in my room. Please, don't throw me out." She begged her son, sobbing, to let her stay in the house, but Fahad showed no mercy. He didn't even ask her if she had eaten. Instead, he grabbed her arm and gave her a harsh shove. Zahida fell onto the road. Luckily, there was no car passing by at that moment. Fahad then got into his car and drove off to work. Zahida sat on the road, overwhelmed, not knowing where to go. After a moment, she made a decision, got up, and started walking down the road. Meanwhile, Fahad returned home from work that day feeling tired and irritable. "Nabila, make me some tea quickly. I have a headache," he said. "Why don't you do your own work? You know Harun keeps bothering me. I have to take care of him too," Nabila snapped. In just a few days, Nabila's condition had worsened. She started regretting her earlier actions. What was so bad about that old woman lying around? At least she used to do all the chores, and she took care of Harun too. Now I have to do everything myself. Nabila's attitude began to shift. She was constantly angry, often arguing with Fahad for no reason. Then Nabila received the good news of another baby on the way. Fahad was overjoyed and began taking care of Nabila himself. He had entirely forgotten about his mother and made no attempt to find out where she was. When Nabila gave birth to her second son, she became even busier. She now had to look after 2 children. Around the same time, Fahad's company started suffering heavy losses. They didn't even pay his salary that month. The company was in such bad shape that many workers had already quit. Seeing the situation, Fahad decided to resign as well. Now he would leave the house every morning to try and find a job at another company. But no matter where he went, he couldn't secure a position. Despite having good qualifications and impressive grades, he remained unemployed. Their financial situation was deteriorating. The house Fahad had purchased was still on installments. When he couldn't make the monthly payment, the landlord repossessed the house and returned their money, forcing them to vacate. At this point, Nabila wasn't on good terms with her own family. Her brother Amir had married someone of his own choosing, and Nabila's quarrelsome nature meant she didn't get along with her sister-in-law either. She suggested to Fahad, "Why don't we rent a place with the money we have left?" But Fahad had a different idea. "No, Nabila, we need to cover our household expenses. Until I find a new job, we need to manage with this money. Why don't we move back to our old house?" Nabila's face went pale. "No way am I going back to that slum," she exclaimed. Fahad, however, had no other option. When they reached Zahida Begum's house, he was sure his mother would be there. But the door was open, and the house was deserted. If she isn't here, then where could she have gone? Fahad wondered. Nabila looked around disdainfully at the old house. Leaving their beautiful home to move into this run-down place was difficult for her. As days passed, Fahad's situation worsened. He couldn't find a job anywhere, and their circumstances became so dire that they were now going hungry. One day, he decided to do manual labor, but it wasn't easy for him. After just one day, he returned home utterly exhausted. His body ached all over. He was now beginning to realize how lovingly his mother had raised him. He remembered how he had pushed her out of the house and felt an overwhelming sense of regret. But his trials weren't over. His younger son passed away from hunger because there was no food left. Now, whenever Fahad earned even a little, he would bring food for Harun first. He had already lost one child and was determined not to lose another. As Fahad sat down to eat one day, he realized he was using the very same dishes his mother had taken with her to the new house, the dishes he had refused to eat from. His heart grew heavy. These days, he was also treating Nabila harshly, holding her responsible for everything. Nabila endured it silently. She had shut all her doors herself and could no longer return to her family. One night, Fahad dreamed of his mother crying bitterly. He tried to approach her, but she stopped him. When he asked neighbors about her, they said they had never seen her come back. Nabila, still mourning the loss of their younger son, now had to deal with Harun's nightly outbursts. Every night, Harun would wake up crying for his grandmother. When Fahad tried to comfort him, Harun would cling to his mother instead, saying, "I don't want to go to Baba." Fahad was deeply troubled, as Harun had always been very close to him. This continued for a week. Every night, Harun would cry and cling to his mother, refusing to go near his father. One night, when Fahad tried to pick him up by force, Harun cried even louder. "I want to go to Mama. You're mean. Whenever I come to you, the path is full of scorpions. Mama, just a little while ago, when I was going toward Baba, there were scorpions and snakes on the path. They tried to bite me. You're mean. Mama, please hold me." Harun began crying. "No, the snakes will bite me." Nabila realized Harun must have had a bad dream. But after a few days, they made another shocking discovery. When they looked at Harun's feet, they were turning blue. Nabila gently touched them, and Harun pulled them back, saying, "It hurts." When Fahad came home, he too was alarmed at Harun's condition. They rushed him to the hospital, Nabila accompanying them. The doctor examined Harun's foot and delivered the grim news. "This foot will never function again. It must be amputated." Nabila, in anguish, cried out, "What happened to my child?" The doctor explained, "He was bitten by a poisonous insect. If we don't amputate, the poison will spread throughout his body." Fahad and Nabila were stunned. "But I never saw any insect in the house," Nabila said through her tears. "And Harun hasn't been outside to play." Fahad, deeply troubled, wondered what was going on. Harun lost his foot. A few days later, similar symptoms appeared in his leg. The doctors had to amputate it as well. Unable to bear the pain and suffering, Harun eventually passed away. The couple sat in mourning for their children, filled with grief. That's when Nabila turned to Fahad and said, "This world is a place of retribution. We have surely been punished for the injustice we did to your mother." Fahad desperately searched for his mother, wandering aimlessly and asking everyone about her. He went through an old closet, finding photographs of her, and carried them as he looked for her. But no one knew where she was. When Zahida Begum had collapsed on the road, a passing car stopped. The driver, Shehroz, was in a hurry. He had important clients waiting at the office. Yet he didn't hesitate. He stopped, helped the elderly woman into his car and asked, "Amma, where do you need to go?" Zahida Begum was crying, repeatedly wiping her tears with the edge of her scarf. Shehroz asked again, "Amma, where is your home?" Looking at him, she replied quietly, "I have no home." "What do you mean? Where were you staying before?" Shehroz asked. "I was living at my son's house," Zahida Begum murmured. "Please, just take me to a shelter." Shehroz continued asking gently, "Amma, are you upset with your family? If so, tell me and I'll help." But Zahida Begum responded, "No, I have no one at all." Eventually, Zahida shared everything, how her son Fahad had treated her so cruelly. Her words brought tears to Shehroz's eyes. He brought her to his own home. Although he cared for her deeply, Zahida remained sad, always missing Fahad and Harun. Shehroz, whose mother had passed away years earlier, found in Zahida a maternal figure he had longed for. He spared no effort in ensuring her comfort and well-being. He even hired a caregiver who stayed with Zahida at all times. Shehroz would often say, "Amma, if you like, I can contact your son." But Zahida would shake her head. "No, beta, I don't want to go back. My son caused me so much pain." There were moments when Zahida would glance at Shehroz and imagine it was Fahad. It seemed to her as if her son were sitting before her. She would offer prayers of gratitude to Allah for Shehroz's kindness, knowing that, If not for him, she would have been wandering homeless, suffering even more. One day, Shehroz returned from work to find the caregiver looking anxious. The caregiver came running to Shehroz, saying, "Sir, Begum Sahiba has a high fever. I just gave her medicine, but it's not coming down." Shehroz called a doctor friend to come to the house. When his friend arrived and examined Zahida Begum, he said, "She's under a lot of stress. Take care of her and make sure she isn't troubled." After the doctor left, Shehroz gently asked Zahida Begum again, "Amma, please tell me where Fahad is. I'll bring him to you. I know that no matter how much I look after you, I can't take your son's place. I can't fill the void he left." Zahida, however, didn't want to face Fahad and Nabila. Even though she thought about Fahad constantly, she remembered the times after her husband's death when she went to bed hungry so her son could eat. She wore tattered clothes to save money to buy him new ones. Tears began to fall from Zahida's eyes as she relived those memories. Shehroz noticed her tears and sat beside her. "Amma, why are you crying now? I know you miss your son. Please, just tell me. I'll bring him here." Zahida Begum whispered, "I just want to see Fahad one last time." By then, Zahida had grown frail. Her breathing became labored, and Shehroz immediately took her to the hospital, where she was put on oxygen. Shehroz had grown attached to Zahida. To him, she felt like the mother he had lost long ago. He held her hand and pleaded, "Amma, please tell me where your son lives. I need to ask him. What crime did the woman commit who raised him, who loved him so dearly, for him to treat her this way?" Shehroz broke down in tears. Meanwhile, Nabila had become very ill, and Fahad brought her to the same hospital. As he walked past his mother's room, Zahida saw him and called out, "Fahad?" Shehroz heard her and turned around, but by the time he reached the doorway, no one was there. Shehroz ran outside and saw a man walking away. "Fahad!" he called. The man stopped and turned around. Shehroz walked up to him. "Is your name Fahad?" "Yes, I'm Fahad," he replied. Shehroz looked at him for a moment and said, "You are so unfortunate. You never valued your mother." "Mother?" Fahad's voice trembled. "Where is my mother? Who are you, and how do you know her?" "Zahida Begum is your mother, isn't she?" Shehroz asked. Fahad nodded, his longing for his mother clear in his eyes. "Tell me, where is my mother?" Shehroz told him, "Your mother is in that room." Fahad rushed to the room, opened the door, and saw Zahida Begum. But as she laid eyes on her son, her final breath left her body. Shehroz hurried to her side. "Amma, look, I brought Fahad. I brought your son." But it was too late. Fahad collapsed to the floor, screaming and crying, "Amma, please, get up. Just once. Look at me. Forgive me. I wronged you so much." But it was all in vain. Now, there was nothing left for Fahad but regret. His disheveled hair and half-buttoned shirt reflected his tormented state. He wandered around like a madman, no longer caring about Nabila or anything else. He spent his days sitting by his mother's grave, sobbing and pleading for forgiveness. "Amma, just rise once, and forgive me." But Zahida was gone forever, and all Fahad had left was the heavy burden of regret.